welcome to 30 Days of Hoya. Today we will take a look at Hoya lacunosa. The bigger Hoya lacunosa actually arrived to me a few days ago. It was sold to me as a division of a larger plant. It was quite affordable, so of course I had to get it, even though I have this small one. The small lacunosa I bought from a collector. I know what you will say, well, lacunosa is very common. Up until last year I couldn't find it anywhere, and it so happened that just after I bought Hoya lacunosa, the cutting from the collector, they got these very big lacunosas in the garden center here. That happens sometimes, but it's okay. When I received the cutting, unrooted cutting last year, it was about 2 or 3 nodes, so somewhere this size. I rooted it in water. As you can see, it grew really nicely from September to now. This lacunosa was in fact bigger, so a chunk of the vine about this size is missing. And what happened is I knocked it over when I was I think watering, and I just knocked it over. It fell down and the part of the vine just broke off. Unfortunately, there was a peduncle there that I damaged. I completely destroyed it. Those things will happen, especially when you put so many plants in one spot and then you think you have so much space, but you don't think about maintaining that space. How will you water it? How will you move around? Or I at least don't think about that. To me, it's like they fit and it's perfect. This one does have a tiny peduncle here, but it's very small. I don't think the camera will be able to catch it. So this one also has a peduncle here. It does have one peduncle here as well. Hoya lacunosa is native to Southeast Asia, to Indonesia and Malaysia. And this is a cool growing Hoya. Lower temperatures will not bother this Hoya too much. So from 10 to 25 degrees of Celsius or from 50 to 80 degrees of Fahrenheit. If you have a cooler home, you should not have any issues growing this Hoya. It does really well, and it grew well for me throughout the entire winter. It was unbothered by the temperatures. My temperatures were around, I would say, 22 degrees of Celsius, 23. Sometimes it's hotter, sometimes it's cooler, but they never really went below 22 and never above 24 or 5, I would say. When it comes to light, I don't think Hoya lacunosa is very requiring. The smaller one was quite far away from my LED lights on my Hoya shelf, and it did grow well throughout the entire winter. I would say this one will do really well in east, northwest, northeast facing windows. When it gets a bit more light, you will see the leaves will get somewhat reddish, you can see here, but also on this one you can see that reddish brownish hue that this Hoya can get. When it comes to watering, I would say be a bit careful with this one. I think this one is a bit sensitive to over watering. I still make sure to check it every 7 to 10 days. The mix is very airy. It doesn't really compact in the pot. There is a bit of cocoa peat in general potting mix, but very little. Mostly it's just large pieces of bark, perlite, leca, and ceramis. The second one you can see is impure peat with not a lot of perlite in there. And this is typically how you will receive your Hoya, in this peat mixture, especially if it's grown in a greenhouse. And by that I mean if it was like mass produced. If it's from a specialized nursery, then I do believe they get the mix right. If you get it from a garden center or in a big box store, you will most likely get this one in peat. And not just this one, all other Hoyas I saw they're sold in peat. That's a bit unfortunate because it's very easy to overwater in peat. So it does hold on to a lot of moisture. It takes a while to dry out. When it dries out, it's very difficult to get it moist again. So you would have to, again, use a lot of water. And that possibly means you will overwater your plant. This one I received 3 or 4 days ago, so I didn't took care of the situation here, but I also didn't water it. I do need to repot it, and I will repot it, even though it's been with me only 3 or 4 days. When I get new Hoyas, if they are in peat, I will repot right away. Peat just doesn't work in my conditions. It's very humid, and it's very difficult for it to dry out. Hoyas are really epiphytic plants, most of them, and this mix, there isn't a lot of air there. There isn't any airflow. It's very compact. When you water it, it will get compacted even more. This amount of perlite is also not enough. It really doesn't do much, I would say, if it does anything at all. So definitely this needs to be changed. Lacunosa has very small white flowers. They look very cute. Mine wanted to flower, but I knocked it over, so sorry for that. I didn't have a chance to smell it, but I do hear that the smell of the flower, the scent is quite heavy, and when it's in bloom, the entire room, or depending where you keep your hoyalacunosa, you will be able to smell it. And what I particularly like on hoyalacunosa is the way it grows, the fact that it makes a very nice hanging basket plant, and the shape of the leaves is just, I think, beautiful. There are lacunosas that will have a silver splash on the leaves. I think it's called Eskimo silver. That one is a bit more difficult to find. The regular one you will be able to find in a garden center fairly easily, especially since last year I think that they are receiving more and more Hoyas, so it's not difficult to get a hold of one. I would say if you are very careful with watering, you shouldn't have a lot of issues with this Hoya. Just make sure to get the mix right, and I think you are good to go. It's not very difficult. It's very resilient to pests and to temperatures and to it being dried out. I never had an issue of vine drying off. I just had the issue of me being clumsy and breaking it off, but I don't think that's Hoya's fault, really. This was Hoya lacunosa, and I will see you in our next 30 Days of Hoya.